Welcome and thank you for joining the NEHA National Webinar Series. Today we're going to discuss the difference between cleaners, disinfectants, and sanitizers within the food service industry and what sets them apart. I'm Christy Denbrow, Chief Learning Officer at NEHA, and I'll be your moderator. Our presenter today is Dr. Juan Goncalves. Juan is a scientific information manager and senior scientist at Procter & Gamble Professional in Cincinnati, Ohio. He has over 15 years of experience in the areas of formulation of cleaners and disinfectants, infection control, and food safety for retail and industrial applications. Dr. Goncalves holds a PhD from the University of Cincinnati, an MBA from Indiana University, as well as a CPFS and ServSafe certifications. We ask that you please write your questions into the chat box, and we will address them at the end of the presentation. If you are not a NEHA member and you enjoy this session, we invite you to become one at neha.org. It's my pleasure to welcome Dr. Goncalves and Juan. Let's get started.
Thank you very much, Christy, for the introduction, and thanks everyone for joining this presentation and taking time from your busy schedules. I want to share my screen now and open my deck and let me know if you can see it.
It looks wonderful. Thank you.
Perfect. All right. So I want to start the presentation with this cartoon that always reminds me of the difficulties that people experience in understanding how to use these products, right? So a little bottle of this hand sanitizer, asking who's going to disinfect him. Anyways, keep that thought in mind as we move across the deck in the slides in this presentation. Here's what's in the agenda for today. We're going to start talking about sanitation in retail food service. So sanitation is the main goal of using cleaners, disinfectants, and sanitizers. We're going to talk about cleaning as a backbone for achieving the effective sanitation outcomes. Then we're going to get into the meaty part of the presentation, which is the differences among cleaners, sanitizers, and disinfectants. And we're going to do a little overview of the features that distinguish them, which is the goal of this presentation. We're going to talk about when and how to use these products according to the food code. And I have a few questions that I prepare for the end of the presentation with answers that I may share along with the presentation at a later time if we don't have time to have some live questions that I would like to take from you. All right, so with that, let's start with the sanitation in retail food service. That's the first bullet point in the agenda. So what is sanitation? Here's a little trivia for you all. Sanitation comes from the Latin word sanitas, which means health. There's a very useful definition in Merriam-Webster, which is the promotion of hygiene to achieve health outcomes for sanitation. It's a very handy definition because it turns out that there's no regulatory definition for the word sanitation, at least when it comes to environmental surfaces, and that I could find anyways. Even though it's a word that's widely used in the food code and also in the Code of Federal Regulations. Here's an example of an excerpt in Title 21 of the Code of Federal Regulations where they talk about sanitation. So basically it's saying that the sanitation for food contact surfaces encompasses cleaning the surfaces as frequently as necessary to protect against contamination of food. In other words, cleaning to protect against contamination of food. So that goes back to the definition of promoting hygiene to achieve good health outcomes, right? So when it comes to what are the steps to achieve sanitation, what's required to achieve sanitation, minimum cleaning and or rinsing with potable water when required are steps that are necessary. So as you think about why are we using cleaners and sanitizers or disinfectants is to achieve what's here, sanitation. That's the reason we're starting with this slide in the presentation. And a takeaway that I would like everybody to have at the end of the presentation is that the word sanitation It's not the same as sanitization. Sanitization is very specific for a antimicrobial benefit that we're going to talk about in the presentation later. Okay. The first thing that we have to talk about when it comes to sanitation is cleaning, because cleaning is the backbone to the effective sanitation. And why is that? Because without proper cleaning of visible and invisible soils, then the lingering food soils or the lingering residues on the surface may inhibit or interfere with disinfectants or sanitizers. So this is a fact that's been proven by scientific evidence. When you have soils on the surface that's not properly cleaned, then that's going to either create a barrier that interferes with the contact between the disinfectant or sanitizer on the surface. Therefore, you're not going to achieve your proper antimicrobial effect. Or maybe that soil is going to react with the active ingredients of the disinfectants or the sanitizers and therefore render them ineffective. Okay, so that's the reason why cleaning is so important, and that's the foundation for sanitation. Unfortunately, there's no regulatory definition or performance standard for a cleaner. In other words, there's no particular threshold of cleaning a given soil to qualify the cleaner as such, unlike a disinfectant or a sanitizer, that every claim is absolutely vetted by the EPA. That's not the case for a cleaner. Because of that, you're going to have a variety of cleaners that are now going to do the job the same way. They're going to vary in terms of the results you achieve for cleaning a surface, depending upon what cleaner you use, the performance, the formulation of the cleaner, the tools, the procedures that you use, right? So you're going to have diverging results for that important step of the cleaning. So how do we measure cleaning if we have those shortcomings in terms of the performance claims or how we use the cleaners? Well, the food code provides with this practical and inexpensive and universal way of measuring cleaning. However, it relies on the census. So there's some requirements here or guidelines for food contact surfaces. And basically it says that you achieve proper cleaning when the surface is clean to the sight and touch, or free of visible encrusted grease, deposits, or other soils. In other words, the surfaces need to look and feel clean. And for non-food contact surfaces, it's also a sensorial guideline, right? So the surfaces need to be kept free of accumulation of dust, dirt, or food residue. So again, these are very easy to understand guidelines. However, they're not necessarily measurable because it relies on census, right? And this is something that we covered in a previous webinar that we're not going to cover here. So I would encourage everyone to review this. It should be posted in the NIHA website. We cover extensively the issues with cleaning. We showed that surfaces that look clean to the naked eye are not necessarily clean when you reveal the soils that are left behind with a red dye. That's an interesting demo that we showed in this presentation. We also show the cleaning performance of a cleaner sanitizer versus a cleaning product and how they diverge significantly in terms of cleaning efficacy when cleaning tough soils commonly found in kitchens, right? So with those issues and shortcomings with cleaners, so what do we do? What are our options, right? So I would encourage everyone also to take a look at this article. It's a 2-page article. Basically, it's a call for action to scrutinize more the products and the procedures that are used in retail food service. One of the NIHA conferences that I attended a couple of years ago, somebody told me, one of the inspectors, that I went to inspect a restaurant and they were using this product that's basically a dilutable product, highly fragranced, and the intent of the product is to create the ambience of the smell, right? So that's what the product is designed for. However, this restaurant owner was using a product like that to clean everywhere in the kitchen, and that's not the product. That's not the target soil that the product was designed for. Okay, so here's a call for action to all of you to guide your the restaurant, the person in charge of the restaurant owner, and making them understand that products are designed for a particular job and they require a particular use of tools that need to be properly spelled out in the label of the product if the product is properly designed for that particular job. So again, take a look at this article because there's some interesting pointers there to have this conversation, right? So we talked about sanitation, which is the purpose of discussing cleaners, sanitizers, and disinfectants, and we talked about cleaning as a backbone for achieving proper sanitation. Now let's talk a little bit about the differences between these three products, which is the meaty part of this presentation, right? So in a nutshell, these are the jobs or the benefits that you can achieve with this product. So a cleaner will help you remove soils, dirt, grime, and stains from surfaces. Notice that a cleaner doesn't have any antimicrobial action here. A sanitizer is a product that will help you reduce bacteria to safe levels. And I want to make an emphasis here on the reducing part and bacteria, okay? The safe levels are dictated by regulatory authorities. A sanitizer will not eliminate every single bacteria that's on the surface. It will reduce it to a safe level. The level is dictated by regulatory authorities, and that's a criteria that's already established that you need to meet in order to register the product with a sanitizer claim. Okay, so the other comment here is the reducing bacteria. Sanitizer doesn't have effects on viruses, only bacteria. With that said, there's some sanitizers that happen to have virucidal efficacy or efficacy against viruses if the claim of or if the benefit is registered as such in the label, right? But a sanitizer is not necessarily or automatically a product that has claims against viruses. So think of a sanitizer as a product that reduces bacteria to safe levels. And then there's a disinfectant, which basically kills bacteria, viruses, and in some cases, fungi. Not all disinfectants have claims against fungi. That's a choice of the person or the company that manufactures or registers the disinfectant. Most of them will have viruses and the claims along with the bacteria kill. Okay, so the takeaway from this slide is that when it comes to antimicrobial potency, disinfectant has a higher antimicrobial potency than a sanitizer, and a sanitizer has a higher antimicrobial potency than a cleaner, which has none because the cleaner doesn't have any claims against pathogens or microbes, right? If a cleaner were to have claim against a microbe or microorganism, then the cleaner should be registered with the EPA. It will no longer be a cleaner. It will be a cleaner sanitizer or a cleaner disinfectant product. Okay, so this is a cartoon that represents in an extremely simplistic way differences in performance between a sanitizer and a disinfectant when it comes to bacteria specifically. So excuse my choice here of pictures for bacteria. So what you see there in the doorknob is a magnifying glass, and it's showing bacteria, different types of bacteria there on the knob. And after you apply a sanitizer, what you'll observe or the benefit of the application of the sanitizer is the reduction of the bacteria that was present originally on the surface before the treatment. Okay, and notice that not all bacteria disappears. There's still some left there. Again, the level of kill of bacteria in a sanitizer is dictated by regulatory authorities so that the sanitizer achieves a benefit of keeping the surface safe, which is a regulatory success criteria. If now you use a disinfectant, then there shouldn't be any bacteria left there. Okay, so disinfectants, higher potency than sanitizers when it comes to bacteria. And that should be the case until the next time that recontamination occurs, or somebody goes back and touches the doorknob, then bacteria is going to be there more likely than not again. So the process continues again. You have to disinfect or sanitize the surface again. When it comes to viruses, and this is the same cartoon, but now I'm showing bacteria and viruses at the same time. The sanitizer will remove again, reduce the bacteria to safe levels, so you still have some bacteria left there on the surface, but not everything gets eliminated, and you still have your viruses, okay? Because the sanitizer doesn't have efficacy against viruses. Some sanitizers happen to have virucidal claims. If they can prove the claim, and if they have the claim registered with the EPA, but that's not necessarily true for every single sanitizer, okay? And then after using a disinfectant with virucidal claims, what you're going to see is that the bacteria is gone. However, there's still a few viral particles left, okay? Which is to say that you don't have to kill every single viral particle to achieve the disinfection of viruses in a disinfectant. And the comment that I want to make about this cartoon is that this is not to assess the risk of utilizing a sanitizer or a disinfectant on a surface when it comes to leaving or not uh, pathogens or microorganisms on the surface. This is basically to show differences in performance between a sanitizer and a disinfectant. Okay. So here's a chart that summarizes now in writing some of the key differences in attributes between these products. First of all, is the registration. So, and the most important one, by the way. So cleaners don't have, they're not EPA registered unless they have a claim that they advertise around removing or killing or having action against microorganisms, in which case they have to have registration. Sanitizers and disinfectants are EPA registered. And when we talk about sanitizers later in this presentation, we're going to make a distinction between food contact and non-food contact sanitizers, which is also something that creates some confusion. Performance claims, this is a summary of the previous slide. Cleaners remove soils. Sanitizers reduce bacteria to safe levels dictated by regulatory authorities. Some food contact sanitizers happen to have virucidal activity. Not all of them do. So again, sanitizers are not automatically virucidal products. Disinfectants have bactericidal, virucidal efficacy, and sometimes they have fungicidal efficacy. When it comes to the dwell time or the contact time, which is a question that comes up all the time, for cleaners, there's no antimicrobial action, so therefore there's no such a thing as a specific contact time that needs to be observed for the cleaner to be efficacious. You just clean until the soil is removed. For sanitizers, a food contact sanitizer needs to be used with at 1 minute contact time. Non-food contact surfaces, up to 5 minutes, and that depends on the product. Some products are significantly faster than that. They cannot take longer than 5 minutes for that particular benefit. For disinfectants, the contact time is up to 10 minutes. This is typical of very diluted products, legacy products, some quads. They have claims up to 10 minutes. Nowadays, disinfectants are significantly faster than this. Pre-cleaning of surfaces. In this case, well, for the cleaner, there's no such a thing as a pre-clean of the surface requirement. Sanitizers, the surface needs to be clean all the time, pre-clean all the time before using the sanitizer to achieve the antimicrobial action. And that's true for food or non-food contact surfaces. For disinfectants, the surface needs to be pre-cleaned if there are visible soils. I would say actually a very large number of disinfectants are registered as a one-step cleaner and disinfectant, which means that there's no pre-cleaner required as long as the soil is not visible. If the soil is visible, then pre-cleaning is required at all times. But some disinfectants have the ability to clean and disinfect at the same time for lightly soiled surfaces. So it's a benefit of removing the step of pre-cleaning the surface. Types of surfaces that we apply these products onto for cleaners, food and non-food contact surfaces. Sanitizers, there's sanitizer for food contact surfaces and non-food contact surfaces. That all depends on how the product is registered. Disinfectants, mostly for non-food contact surfaces, or some disinfectants that are for food contact surfaces. Again, that all depends on the label and the registered use directions. What's required to be used in food service operations according to the food code. Cleaners and sanitizers for sure. Food contact sanitizers there is. Disinfectants. The food code only talks about using a disinfectant when there's a bodily fluid spill, and we're going to talk about that later in the presentation. Formulation, and that's a critical difference between sanitizers and disinfectants. Um, Food contact sanitizers, the ingredients that a formulator can choose from to formulate the sanitizer that's food contact are limited by regulatory guidelines. So not all ingredients of there could be used. And out of those that could be used, there's a limit in terms of how much you can add to the formula. That's not the case for a disinfectant necessarily or a cleaner. And the trade-off is that by utilizing ingredients that you can leave on a plate, for example, if it's a full contact surface, um, the trade-off is that sometimes those ingredients that you have to not, that you're not allowed to use, happen to be good cleaners. So solvents, for example, powerful solvents that are used for degreasing soils in cleaners or disinfectants. Some of them are not are too hazardous to be used in a food contact sanitizer. Therefore, you cannot formulate with them, and as a result, the sanitizer may not be a good cleaner. And typical ingredients, active ingredients that is for this product, for cleaners, and there's no such thing as an active ingredient. Active ingredient is again the one that has antimicrobial properties. That's not the case for cleaners. For sanitizers, the typical ones are quats, also chlorine, alcohols, and acids. For disinfectors, the same as the sanitizers, but there's also things like peroxides, peracids, and other surfactants. Not an exclusive list, but the most typical ones that are found out there. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about sanitizers, food versus non-food contact surfaces. Before we get there, let's remind ourselves of what a food contact surface is. So here's the definition of a food contact surface per the food code. The first one is very self-explanatory and evident, right? It's a surface that's in direct touch with food. But there's also another definition, which is a surface from which food may drain, drip, or splash into food or onto another food contact surface, right? So these are some examples of surfaces that may not look like, these are not your typical, dishes, glasses, and utensils, or cutting boards or food preparation tables, but they may be considered food contact surfaces because of the definition that's set on point number 2. So now that we know what's a food contact surface versus a non-food contact surface, this is how we use the products, right? So we have sanitizers for food contact surfaces, and we have sanitizers for non-food contact surfaces. Okay, they have similarities and differences. They're more different than they are similar. They're similar in the fact that both of them have to be EPA registered because they're making claims against bacteria. They're different in that the ingredients used, again, something that I made a comment about before, the food contact sanitizer, the ingredients used for the formulation are limited per regulatory guidelines. That's the title there in the Code of Federal Regulations that tells you what ingredients to use and how much. For a non-food contact sanitizer, you don't have that limitation. Therefore, you have many more ingredients to choose from. When it comes to contact time, the food contact sanitizer needs to be used in 1 minute. The non-food contact sanitizer, anytime up to 5 minutes. Requirements for measuring the active ingredient, that's the other important one. A food contact sanitizer, you have to measure the strength of the active ingredient, typically with a paper strip. For a non-food contact sanitizer, you already need to do that. Potable water rinse requirements for a food contact sanitizer, you don't have to rinse it. Matter of fact, the idea is to leave the food contact sanitizer on the food contact surface. For a non-food contact sanitizer, it depends on how the product is registered. Some products tell you do not apply on food contact surfaces, or they may say if the product is cross-contaminate a food contact surface, follow with a potable water rinse. It all depends on what product it is. Again, you have to read the label. How is the product applied? For a food contact sanitizer, it's typically through immersion, like in a through compartment sink, or you have a sprayer bottle, or you have a rag or a sponge in, for example, the red bucket. For a non-food contact sanitizer, it will be similar to the food contact sanitizer application methods, but you also have things like a mop if you want to sanitize the floor. And the types of surfaces you can sanitize with a food contact sanitizer are hard and non-porous. For a non-food contact sanitizer, you have hard non-porous surfaces, but you also have soft surfaces. So there's sanitizers for upholstery, for example, if you want to sanitize the fabric of a, say, for example, a couch or a privacy curtain in a hospital. There's also sanitizers for linen or laundry sanitizers, right? So those are non soft surfaces, non-food contact, of course. Right. So, what are some of the other things that differentiate cleaners from sanitizers from disinfectants? The cleaning ability, we talked about this. Sanitizers are uh, less likely to be as effective as cleaners, as cleaning soils compared to cleaners or disinfectants because of the restrictions on the ingredients that you can use to formulate. There's also differences in compatibility with several things. Again, it depends on the formulation and what disinfectant or sanitizer you're using. Cleaners, we don't really for cleaners and disinfectants, we don't really think much about compatibility with reusable towels. For sanitizers, that's not the case. Typically, quads are sensitive to reusable towel because of binding. Organic soils, that's also difference in compatibility among these products. So things like bleach or alcohols that might be a little bit more sensitive to the presence of organic soils. Uh, the compatibility with surfaces is also different between these products. Acidic products are not usually recommended for soft metals because of corrosion. Cleaners or disinfectants that have very powerful solvents to degrees, they tend to be deleterious to things like plastics or some elastomers, right? Water hardness susceptibility is also a difference between these products. So for an ready-to-use product, there's no issues because the product is already formulated with the right quality water. If you're using a dilutable product, though, depending upon the hardness of the water where you are, your quads, for example, will be sensitive to that. Also, the impurities in the water, like metal ions, for example, they may interfere in the effectiveness of certain things like bleaches or peroxides. Okay. Shelf life is another difference. So some products are more stable, not only in the bottle unopened, but also once you make a dilutable sample of it. So quads are in general a lot more stable than things like bleach or hypochlorous acid, for example, right? And also the safety profile. So things like alcohols, those are flammable. They may require special storage conditions. There's certain things that you cannot transport in high quantities, like peroxides, for example, that are concentrated. And of course, these products will differ in terms of the PPE that's required. So some things require gloves and safety goggles. Some things do not require any of that. It all depends on the formula that you're using and the product. Okay. So if I want to know how to use that disinfectant and what are the claims that are approved by the EPA regarding that disinfectant or sanitizer. Okay. So here's a way to do it. It's very easy. And basically what you do is if it's a registered product, and it should be because it has claims, antimicrobial claims, so it's either a sanitizer or a disinfectant or both, then you look for the label, what it says, the EPA registration number. That's that number right here. This is an example, not an actual product. Okay. There's three sets of number there. The first number, there, the 1, 2, 3, 4. That's the number that identifies the company that registered the formula. And the second number is a formulation identifier. So the actual content of that product that identifies a unique formulation. The third number there is the identifier of another company Sometimes it's, companies that register a disinfectant, they license their products to other people to sub-register their formulations. So what you need to find out what the formula is all about, what the formula can achieve, you just have to use the first two numbers there, and that's it. So you locate the label, locate the first numbers on that EPA registration number right there. You go to this website, then you don't have to copy this link. What I do is I Google master label lookup and takes me directly to this link right here. And then you're gonna enter the first two sets of numbers. In this case, 1234 567 and the website, and then you're going to have a bunch of master labels for the same product that have a chronological order. So many of these products have been reviewed several times over the years by the EPA. What will happen is that at the very top of those records, you're going to find the most recent label that was approved by the EPA for that particular product. So over the years, the registrant may choose to add claims or remove claims, or the EPA may ask the registrant to change certain things on the claims, and therefore that label gets updated over time. But in the website, you're going to find every single one of them from the initial registration till the end. Okay, so that's what the website looks like right here. And what it says, EPA registration number, there in that cell, you enter those two sets of number, and then you have all the records. And I'm not going to do it here live because otherwise I'm going to show a commercial product, and we don't want to do that. The one comment that I'm going to make, though, is once you go to this tool and enter the number, you may see names there that do not reflect the name of the actual product that you have in your hands. Okay. So, for example, I have a bottle of a disinfectant that's called disinfectant ABC, and I enter the number in the website, and the product name is something like formulation 123. It doesn't mean that's a different product. It's the same product as long as the label on my disinfectant ABC, that EPA number is the same one that I enter in this website. Okay. So commercial names are up to the manufacturer or distributor of the formulation. That's different than the name of the product that was chosen by the registrant when they initially submitted the product to the EPA, right? Some special cases for registered antimicrobial products. This is actually a product that exists. Many products like that exist in the marketplace. Dilutable concentrates that may be used for different benefits depending upon how you dilute them, for example, right? So this is an actual product that exists in the marketplace. It's a concentrated quad product. So I can use the same product as a disinfectant, as a food contact sanitizer, or as a non-food contact sanitizer, depending upon things like how I dilute it. Okay, so this is the, again, label directions on what to do if I want to achieve that benefit. Okay, so different dilutions there, and also different contact times. So if I want to use this product as a disinfectant, I have to get 550 ppm of active ingredient, and I have to observe a contact time of 10 minutes. If I want to use this product as a food contact sanitizer, then my dilution needs to be linear, 150 to 400 ppm, and I have to use it for 1 minute. Okay, and there's also some benefits there that change depending upon what I'm trying to accomplish. Again, as a disinfectant, I'm able to kill viruses, the ones that are listed on the master label, by the way. And as a food contact sanitizer or non-food contact sanitizer, I'm only killing bacteria if I use the product this way. The takeaway from this slide is that the same product can achieve, as sold, can achieve several benefits depending upon how I dilute it, the contact times, how I follow the label instructions, and that's the key. So register label use directions will dictate how the product can be used for what benefit that wants to be achieved. So that's a special case. Not all products do this. The other special case is a cleaner and sanitizer that doesn't require a potable water rinse in between those steps. So some products are registered in such a way that, for example, in a 3-compartment sink, you can skip the rinse part, or you can use a product like this in a 2-compartment sink. And that happens if the product is registered that way. In other words, usually the product will have the exact same dilution, and it's the same composition for both the wash and the sanitization, right? So there's no cross contamination of different chemicals towards the sanitizing step, and that will require also to be registered as such, right? So not all products are registered as cleaners and sanitizers without the rinsing step. For those applications where you have a two compartment sink without the rinse step, then I believe that the local authority will require a variance for that to be authorized. The caveat with these products is even though you have the benefit of skipping the rinse step in that simplification, you're utilizing a food contact sanitizer to clean. And as we talked about before, they're not necessarily very good cleaners against tough soils. All right, so what about thermal sanitization? Now we're not using chemicals or a registered EPA registered product to achieve antimicrobial action. Now we're using hot water, okay? So the food code allows for options for achieving the sanitization utilizing hot water. The first one is a soak in water at 170 Fahrenheit for 30 seconds, which I haven't seen anybody do, I guess because of obvious safety concerns. The other one is a more common one, and that would be high throughput mechanical or washing machines. So basically, what you do is you have to run the dishes once cleaned and make sure that they achieve a surface temperature of 160 Fahrenheit. So what you do is you run the dishes, you insert this irreversible temperature register. Usually it could be like a little device that measures the maximum temperature that it achieved in the washing machine in the rinse step, and it has to be at least 160 Fahrenheit. The idea here is that if the surface of a ware achieves 160 Fahrenheit, that's enough heat to take care of all the pathogens that are on the surface. So this is the option for non-chemical sanitization. Now, a caveat here is that just like we talked about at the beginning with sanitation concept in cleaning, the wares need to be cleaned for the thermal approach to be efficacious. And that's why this is the reason why food soils are insulators. So this is a chart that talks about heat conductivity. So don't be concerned about the physics about heat conductivity. The only thing that you have to know is that the higher the number here, the easier it is for that surface to be heated to a certain temperature. So if you look at things like copper or aluminum, they have a very high number. Therefore, they get hot very quickly if you're using hot water. Okay, that's why they're used for things like heat exchangers, right, or for cooking. If you look at things like protein, fats, carbohydrates, and fiber, the number is significantly smaller, which means that they don't get hot when exposed to a hot environment. So in other words, if I have a dish that's dirty and I stick one of those irreversible temperature registers on the dish and comes out with 160 degrees at least, then the rinse step was working properly, but the ware is dirty, and therefore there wasn't any thermal sanitization because the dirt, the soils here were acting as a insulator. And again, this is why animals that live in the Arctic have a skin that's very rich in fat, because that basically protects them against the effects of varying temperatures, right? So take away, you can use heat sanitization for ware washing machines where you don't have chemicals, but yet you need to have proper cleaning. Otherwise, the heat's not going to do much in terms of antimicrobial action. So when and how do we execute these steps? When and how do we clean? When and how do we sanitize or disinfect? So when it comes to cleaning food contact surfaces, the food code is very prescriptive in this, and there's a lot of detail in that. There's things like before using a different type of raw animal food, when switching from working with raw foods to ready-to-eat foods, also when working with foods that require time and temperature control. So those are the TCS foods. When using a food temperature measuring device like a thermometer, for example, you need to clean the surfaces. Obviously, when contamination is suspected, for things like when you're working with TCS foods, at least 74 hours. These are food contact surfaces again, in the presence of TCS foods, unless there's some exceptions, and those exceptions are listed in the food code, and I'm not going to go through them because there's a lot of detail there. For non-TCS foods, you have things like obviously when contamination is suspected or likely, things like utensils that are used in these are buffets. They also need to be clean, and there's a specification there of at least 24 hours when restocking this thing. So again, this is a very brief summary of all the occasions where the food code indicates this is when food contact surfaces need to be clean. Okay. Um, when do we sanitize them? And that's a lot easier now. Basically, the guideline is you have to sanitize a food contact surface after you clean it. Okay, that's an easy one to remember. So cleaning the food contact surface is required, um, as in the previous two slides. In all of those occasions and all of those risk factors, that's where you're going to clean them. If you clean the food contact surface, then you sanitize it. That's the end of it. When do we disinfect the food contact surface? And this is where part of the issues start. So right now the food code doesn't indicate this, doesn't address disinfection explicitly, and that would be for either food or non-food contact surfaces. So it doesn't matter what kind of surface it is. This is an excerpt of the food code. It only talks about having written procedures to address cleanup, vomiting, and diarrheal events. So there's a bodily fluid spill in the facility that has to be a written procedure. The annex the food code on that section, which is not codified language, but some scientific guideline, basically says that at minimum you should have a disinfectant that kills norovirus. The assumption being that half of the foodborne illnesses in restaurants are driven by noro per CDC data. Therefore, at minimum you should have in the premises a disinfectant that kills norovirus. But if you look at this, it doesn't tell you when proactively to disinfect, or if you have an outbreak or that's driven by a different pathogen that's not norovirus. And these are things that that became an issue during the COVID pandemic. People were asking, so how do I disinfect my dishes against SARS-CoV-2? Well, there's really nothing in the food code about that specifically, at least in terms of using a disinfectant register to kill SARS-CoV-2. So the EPA, through the emergency ruling of utilizing a product that has the emerging viral pathogen statement, they authorize certain products to be used against SARS-CoV-2. However, those products, many of them, if not the vast majority of them, were not appropriate to be used on food contact surfaces, right? So we're trying to address this issue right now through the Conference for Food Protection, and the last conference in Houston. There was an issue submitted to the FDA where basically there's language that's being proposed to be added in the food code that addresses when and how to disinfect food contact surfaces in restaurants and food service establishments. So that's now in review, right? What about non-food contact surfaces? So things like your bathrooms or your floors, right? So this is the only thing that's talked about in the food code. Again, this is from the annex. Basically, the idea here is that non-food contact surfaces needs to be clean so that we prevent the accumulation of pathogenic microorganisms. Again, there's no specific language about disinfection or sanitization of non-food contact surfaces in the food code. They only talk about cleaning. We argue that in addition to preventing the accumulation of the environment that would create the conditions for pathogenic microorganisms or pests to grow. There's also another benefit, which is obviously preventing things like slippery floors and or fires. Um, So to the right hand side of the deck here, you have a bad example of a fume hood that hadn't been cleaned, and therefore there's a huge higher fire hazard um, in this establishment, right? But that's basically all that's it for non-food contact surfaces. So with that, and I don't know how I'm doing in time, I have prepared some frequently asked questions from the field with answers. So I may just go for them.
And Juan, we have quite a few questions from
Awesome.
attendees. If you would like to address those, it's up to you.
Please, please. Yeah, let's go ahead.
Okay, so one of the first ones we have is in regards to hand hygiene and how alcohol-based sanitizers do not kill the norovirus. So what do you suggest in that? And also the root cause analysis of norovirus.
So for hand hygiene, what's recommended is washing your hands. There's no utilizing a sanitizer as a replacement for washing your hands. That's a guideline in the food code. You may use a hand sanitizer after you wash your hands. And then depending upon how the sanitizer is manufactured, then you may or may not do certain tasks in the kitchen or may or may not utilize gloves. But to answer the question right now, the food code only requires the hand washing. Okay. Now I would say the more fundamental problem here is not the hand washing necessarily, but how do you avoid it to begin with the risk of transmission of norovirus in the facility. So if you have an employee that's ill, how do you isolate the person or prevent the person from working in the facilities, right? So that's an entire conversation that goes beyond the scope of this presentation. I did attend, by the way, a couple of weeks ago, um, uh, working group in the AFDO, the Healthy People Goal 2030. And this is something that we're starting to address, and we're going to have some recommendations because we don't necessarily believe this is a product issue. It's more of a policy issue, if that makes sense.
Okay, moving on to another question. Do any cleaners inhabit or conflict with sanitizers or disinfectants chemically? For example, ammonia and chlorine.
So, yes. Well, first of all, when you have chlorine, you shouldn't really be mixing anything with it. So, you don't use chlorine unless the surface was very properly rinsed to avoid any incompatibilities there. I would say though that the reason for having a rinse step in between the wash and the sanitize is exactly to prevent chemical incompatibility between a cleaner and a sanitizer. So many cleaners are formulated with surfactants. They're typically encountered in most products are called anionic surfactants, and they tend to neutralize quats just because of the chemical nature of these molecules. So if you are not to properly rinse the surface that you cleaned with a cleaner that has anionic surfactants, and you would deactivate the quats. That's the reason for having the rinse step. And that's what you have to do. You have to rinse all the time unless the product is specifically registered to be used as a cleaner and sanitizer without the rinse step. And that would be only if you use the exact same formula for the two steps. So there's no issues with carryover of chemicals that shouldn't be in the rinse step.
Thank
And
you.
ammonia and chlorine are things that definitely you don't want to mix anywhere, anytime.
Thank you. Our next question is, what ingredient do we need to watch out for in sanitizer disinfectants that will bleach or taint the paint in furniture or fiber? Like peroxide will discolorize wood.
So sometimes it's not necessarily the active ingredient, but some of the other ingredients that are in the formulation. I would say that for questions like that, best thing to do is that's a sensorial claim, not an antimicrobial claim. Those are not uh, regulated by the EPA. So the best thing to do is to talk to the manufacturer of that product and ask for guidance in terms of risk of discoloration. Not all peroxides are deleterious to colors. So in laundry, for example, there's many color-safe peroxides that don't happen to have any issue with the discoloration of upholstery of the textiles. Um, Wood is a different thing. I mean, you don't really want to use anything in wood unless you have sealed wood, and that would depend on the kind of sealant that you use. Polyurethanes are better than polyacrylates, but again, that's a question for the manufacturer of the product.
Okay, thank you. Moving on. What is the correct concentration for quaternary ammonia at a 3-compartment sink? Is it 200 ppm?
It's what the master label says of the razor product, and that depends on the formulation. So some quads are actually mixtures of different molecules, and they would have different thresholds, right? So some of them will be 200, some of them will be 400. The product might be registered with a range. So one of the slides that I showed before, the dilutable concentrate, where you can do disinfection, sanitization of food contacts, and sanitization of non-food contacts. For the sanitization of food contact surface, you have a range between 150 and 400 ppms, right? So you have to follow the label directions of that particular product. For that one that I showed, it depends on things like the hardness of the water that you have in your facility when you're preparing the dilution. It will also depends maybe on the claims you want to achieve. One strain you may have more bacteria killed than at the other, even though both of them are fine to be used in a sink. Bottom line is you have to read the label directions because that's what's going to dictate what's a level that you want to maintain.
Thank you. I know we're just shooting these at you bullet point fast, but we have quite a few
That's good.
questions. So thank you. The next one is, what is the difference between antibiotic resistance and antimicrobial resistance? And does it apply to both sanitizers and disinfectants?
So I'm not quite sure there's a technical difference between them. I would say the antibiotic resistant is more used in the realm of drugs and what happens to the drugs in your body. So, for example, you might have an infection of with a microbe that's antibiotic resistant. So, say a ear infection, and you're taking, I don't know, amoxicillin, and doesn't do anything. You still have your ear infection. That you may consider that an antibiotic resistant strain of whatever bacteria is, right? So that's where I see the word antibiotic resistant mostly used in medical terms.
Oh, Juan, did we lose you? Are you still there? It says you are connecting to audio. Let's just give him a second to get him to there you are. You pop right back in.
Oh,
Can you hear us?
oh yes. Oh, I
Okay.
disconnected. I wasn't sure. I have my entire screen shown right now.
Okay.
Sorry.
Well, here's
Well, what
another
I was
question.
saying is that antibiotic is a word that I have seen mostly used in medical field, and antimicrobial mostly used on environmental surfaces, but they all refer to the same thing. There's an active ingredient that's going to target that particular organism, whether it's a disinfectant on a surface or whether it is a drug on your body. And those bacteria happen to have resistance to that particular active ingredient and not be effectively killed.
Okay, now we're going to go into steam cleaning. This question says, will steam cleaning react to disinfectants slash sanitizers, or do we need to avoid this in washing? For an example, I have a steamer to clean floors. I just lost that question. It just bounced off on me.
So There,
Okay, to clean floors, and will it react to the chemicals that I already used to disinfect it?
so a steamer would be a device. So the difference between a liquid that's in a bottle and something like a steamer or a UV light lamp, or something like one of those things like, look, a refrigerator where you get salt and water and you make hypochlorous acid out of it. It's that those are devices. Those are not pesticidal formulas. So they're registered. They're scrutinized by the EPA in a different way. So a steamer, if the steamer has any claims against microbes, that would be up to the manufacturer to prove what are the claims that they can achieve. I have seen guidelines from certain health departments where they say if you have bodily fluid incident and the suspected organism is norovirus, so what do you do with the carpet? And they say, well, you can steam the carpet at, I think it's 212 Fahrenheit with the steam, and for 5 minutes, something like that. That's a guideline set forth by the department, not necessarily a claim that's approved by the EPA. And I mean, so really it all depends on what data is there to support from the manufacturer. The products that are completely vetted against all the claims that they have on the label are those that are registered in the EPA. They have an EPA number. And again, you can go on the website that I pointed out in my presentation, download the master label, and see exactly what are the things that you can kill or cannot kill per the EPA. The other question was incompatibility. There's I don't for carpets. I don't believe there's some such a thing as a disinfectant on a carpet. I think carpet it's a completely different environment than upholstery. Like for example, in a couch. So I would refrain from talking about disinfecting the carpet and what happens to what's on the carpet if I use a steamer on top. And if there's somebody from the EPA in the audience, please feel free to chime in and share your thoughts.
Thank you. The next one is, are disinfectants food safe?
It depends. So some disinfectants happen to be formulated in a way that the ingredients of choice, the ingredients on that formula, and the concentration of those ingredients, how much of the ingredients you added into that formula, make them such that you don't need to rinse the surface with potable water. That would only be known if you read the master label. And if the master label says this is how you use a product to disinfect against bacteria or to disinfect against viruses, and you do not need to use a potable water rinse on food contact surfaces, then the answer is yes. Not every single disinfectant is safe for food contact surfaces. Most of them are not. Some of them will say things like rinse with water if there's cross contamination with the food contact surface. Some of them will say explicitly do not use on dishes, utensils, or glasses. It all depends on the registration and the claims that are approved. So read the label.
Okay, we have time for one more question, even though we have several more, unfortunately. We can send those to you, Juan, and if you want to answer those, we can put those and send those
Sure.
to the attendees when we send out the recording. This last question is, how reliable are the temperature strips? I've done side-by-side comparisons where one will change color and the second will not.
That so I don't think there's anybody regulating the accuracy of the irreversible temperature register devices. I would point out two things. Number one, when you do your comparison, make sure that all conditions are created equal. In other words, that you have the same exposure of the water rinse on the wear with the same impingement of the water. So, for example, if you have a crowded rack and then one device is in a place that's exposed to the water rinse, but the other is not, obviously that's going to affect your reading. I would say though that if the parameters of the data plate of the machine, that this machine should have a data plate that says here's the minimum water temperature and the minimum the operating pressure of the water in the nozzles. If those machines are working according to that specification, and if the plates are not uh, laid out in a rack in a way that prevent the rinse from reaching all surfaces of the wear, then there's a likelihood that the machine is doing its job. These are NSF certified machines. So I would contact the manufacturer of the razor devices and tell them about the concerns I may have, troubleshooting guidelines on how to achieve more consistent numbers, and run the tests again per the manufacturer recommendations.
Wonderful. And Juan, thank you so much for your time today. Unfortunately, we are out of time. And we would like you to fill out the quick survey that will show up at the end of this webinar, as your feedback is very important to us, and it helps us to continue our mission here at NEHA to build, sustain, and empower an effective environmental workforce. And again, we thank you, Juan, for your time and your knowledge. We hope you come back and see us again and we can answer more questions. And we wish all of you attending a very best of the rest of your day. Thank you all.